Okay, the stream has started. Now I can check and see if it's been accepted.
I'm going to change
Okay.
cameras for a second, so I'll be right back.
Sure.
Sure. Twitch has accepted the YouTube has accepted the stream. I won't start the Facebook stream until Mike gets back.
Okay.
We might want to have folks put mute on.
Okay, we can
Until
do
they're-
that. If just it'll strengthen the signals if people have mute on, except for when you're talking.
Good
But
point.
I'm not going to do that though.
No.
Right. In the station.
Well, we have a very quiet acoustic atmosphere.
Right.
We had dogs barking in the background. You might
Right.
want to have it.
Yeah, I'm careful about that at home.
How
Like-
often have you seen something on YouTube where there's a dog barking and the speaker says, "Someone must be at the door. Please excuse the
Right.
dog." You know.
Right. Yeah, my dog or the
It is
cat.
guaranteed to be me, so I am going to mute until I have something to say because my background is a bit loud dog, 3 children, even a turtle. So, yeah.
Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Well, we'll just, there's a lot to talk about in this show. So I'm not worried about those kinds of things. We'll just, people just, say what, but as far as a talking circle element, though, it makes it a little harder when people aren't visual. So maybe I'll cue people, or we'll have a set order of, start with Jalonda maybe first, then Shyana, then Peter, then Mike. You want to do that? Is that good?
No one knows who
Because-
you're talking to, though. You got to say something.
Is that good for people? Anyone?
Sure. Just let us know
Okay,
or address us by name and we'll respond.
sure.
Okay, are you ready to start, Vicki?
Yes.
Let's see if Facebook accepts this. Okay, Facebook has accepted the stream. Step 1, Vicki, do you have the switch that says on the air?
Yes.
Flip the switch when you're ready.
Wait a minute. Oh, there it is.
There's the red light. You hear the clap, you're on the air.
Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, also the home of our producer, Richard Wicca. Thanks, Richard. And thanks to our friends at Buff State University, WBNY, Buff State's original alternative radio station, where we're also streaming and broadcasting. So thank you to our friends at WBNY. When I think of gratitude, I also think of our indigenous friends and how, in spite of all the really near extermination and hardship and violence that they've suffered, they continue to start everything with thankfulness, and their thankfulness goes especially to Mother Earth, to the living waters that really enable our lives, to the different creatures and all the plants and the different elements in the creation, and to our Creator and the love that we all share and that we should be, and the instructions that we've been given that we should be following if we want life to continue in this creation. So thank you to our indigenous friends. So they would say, in the Haudenosaunee would say Nyahweh, and the people would say Nyo. So you can say Nyahweh.
Yo.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and I'm very, very excited about the show we're doing tonight. We're going to talk about the buffalo blizzard response. So this horrific blizzard that we have suffered through, and some have suffered horrifically, and on top of all the terrible year that we've had, it has been difficult, and there's a lot to talk about with the blizzard response. So what we like to do is start off with, I'll introduce our guests, which we have quite a few tonight. First, we have Jalonda Hill. Jalonda is the executive director of Colored Girls Bike 2. She's also the coordinator of the Fair Fines No Fees Coalition, and she's also a student now, again, master's level student at UB in urban planning. So hi, Jalonda.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Vicki.
Oh, we're so glad you're here. And also we have Shyana Broughton. Shyana is on the board of Colored Girls Bike 2 and is also the director of Our Mommie Village, which is a doula, full service and just healthful and healthy, wonderful organization. Shyana, welcome.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
And we have Peter Rizzo, also part of the Fair Fines No Fees Coalition, and another urban planner, and just a renowned urban planner that warned people about the VA problem out in, what's the city?
Pembroke.
Pembroke. Of course, I should have remembered Pembroke. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you so much for having me, Vicki. Appreciate it.
Last but not least, special friend of the show and wonderful professor of media studies and communications at Buff State, who's an author and a commentator, and I would say special advisor to the Peace Center at times, Mike Niman. Mike, thank you for coming on.
Always good to be here.
Great to have you here. So we have a lot of people and a lot to say, but if we could just go quickly around with just what are some of the values that you want to uphold in this conversation about the blizzard. So Jalonda, do you have one or two you want to mention?
Yeah. So just really quickly, I would say radical leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership. Yeah. So radical leadership, creativity. So imagination and creativity, and people over profits.
Wonderful. Oh, those are all three so wonderful, and they have precursors of what you may be saying. Shyana, you have a couple?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Like, I think at this point, because we know that it's going to snow, like, we have to problem solve way ahead of time and not planning like for disaster in December. Maybe in the spring is much better. So, yes, being creative, but also just being ready to think about this way ahead of now.
Yes. So that forward planning, back to planning. Speaking of planning, so Peter?
Yeah, so forward thinking, preparedness, thoughtful response. It's all about people at the end of the day. We're here to serve. Government exists to serve the people, and they woefully they failed tremendously.
Right.
And I think that we need to be creative about solutions and thoughtful and caring to others. That's why we're here.
Right. All wonderful ones. And Mike?
Honesty.
Yes.
It's, oh my God, I've made so many mistakes in my life, we all have.
Right.
So we can't really problem solve when people have made mistakes, and they've got plenty of good reasons for having made mistakes. Lack of sleep, an extraordinary amount of work that they were doing, and so on.
Right.
Instead of digging down and getting defensive, just like, okay, how can we do this better? So honesty and then always remember that we're the government. I got to bring I have to bring the non-hierarchical thing into it, and we really saw that. So many so many communities in Buffalo made it through this because they weren't waiting. People just helped each other, and now we're doing that again to, ask the questions on, okay, what can we do as a city? So we're the government, then we have people who work for us.
Right. Well, thank you for those. And actually, the two that I would mention they've been mentioned indirectly, but I think of Dr. King and truth and love, unarmed truth and unconditional love. And so unarmed truth means, it's not about trying to get somebody. It's about truth, just like you said about honesty, about radical leadership, which includes that humility that would be that, honestly admitting to mistakes so the truth and love, of course, it's that love that motivates. And that's the reason that we need to do better, that caring for people. And anyway, so we've been dabbling into it. So now let's really get into it. And I want to ask Jalonda, what do you think of, and share some of your thoughts about the Buffalo blizzard response?
Yeah, thank you, Vicki. So we essentially, Karina and I wrote an op-ed,
Mm-hmm.
and we we kind of analyzed this issue through like 3 areas. So just really failed leadership,
Mm-hmm.
And a need for new, fresh leaders, with creative ideas that are unafraid to, break past and disrupt the status quo. And then also, the long-standing systemic issues that
Mm-hmm.
the city of Buffalo just kind of failed to resolve. And so when this crisis hit, obviously it disproportionately impacted, right? Sorry. It impacted those communities that are already struggling and are in a state of emergency already, on the day-to-day. And so then I thought I just deleted this. I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
Hold
don't
on.
worry. No, you're quite right.
Yeah.
Go
So,
ahead.
and then the other part of this is like the planning issue, right? So you have Peter here, who's an urban planner. I'm in school for urban planning, and I'm learning just how critical urban planning policies are to keeping people safe, but then also, preparing for disasters. But not only during emergency situations, but just day-to-day quality of life issues that need to be addressed for the people in Buffalo. So I would say those 3 areas for me really stuck out to me. And then the final thing, obviously, because all of those things were a problem, you really seen just how great, despite, all of the racial tension that exists in Buffalo,
Mm-hmm.
the class divide,
Mm-hmm.
people literally came together, and it was such a beautiful and powerful thing to see.
Right.
I've seen the community come together, but I've seen the community come together in a way that I hadn't seen before. And that was really, really powerful. And it just shows that, the people truly can keep each other safe if we can find ways to work together, which isn't the easiest thing because you have the haves and you have the have-nots.
Right.
And,
Right. Just before we move on, I just want to ask you, did they tell you at the Buffalo News whether they were going to print your letter at all or not? Because they mentioned you in an article and they quoted your sort of headline that, they failed miserably or whatever the exact verbiage was. But then they have not printed your letter yet. It wasn't a letter, your another voice column that you submitted. Did they get back to you about that or no?
I think we dropped the connection.
Oh,
to Jalonda.
oops. Yeah, thank you for telling me.
Yeah, I think she had a lot more to say, but it dropped the call.
Yeah, she's back. She should be back.
Yeah.
So Jalonda, I was just asking whether
my apologies.
That's all right.
Yeah.
I'll try to make sure if somehow people drop the call that I get you back in quickly. So did the Buffalo News tell you whether they intended to print your Another Voice op-ed or no?
Yeah, so the op-ed was published.
Oh, it was.
And then we also did a WBFO interview just talking
Right.
about how can the city of Buffalo reimagine safety. Yeah.
Good. So people can look for those.
And yeah, sorry. And one more thing. And I just want to
Mm-hmm.
emphasize, it's not just that it's the haves and the have-nots, because that's like a really simplified way to describe why it's so hard for people of all walks of life to come together. But it's like years and years of the disrespect that the Black community kind of receives in this country, which is, not receiving reparations for all of these years, Black bodies being gunned down in the street by the police, right? Like all of these different things, while we live in a world where you have so many other races and groups of people just, experiencing this quality of life that a lot of Black people just wish they could experience. So, I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Jalonda. So powerful, and you're so right. Shyana, what would you like to add about the Blizzard response?
I think, of course, living through exactly what we're describing, just at this point, it should be embarrassing enough to just walk away and look at new leadership because of how poorly things have been handled. Like, I just don't understand how, like, we continue to, in each emergency, come up with the same struggle, but at the same time, also seeing that we did come together and that it was a very beautiful thing to see. Like, a lot of us were in dire straits, and we were able to depend on community more than we, I guess, would have assumed. So I think, honestly, like, it showed both sides. How we need new leadership, but we also need to know who our neighbor is a little bit more.
Right. And Mike, what would you say?
Well, I want to talk about the media response, particularly with this really hyped up looting meme. And so before we're done here, we'll talk about that, or I can talk now. I don't know what works.
Well, when we'll be sure that we're getting to the looting part of it, either during this show or even at the beginning of the next show. But for now, just in terms of the response, the quality of the response. You can bring it in the ways that it relates to the response.
Well, that was part of the response is you had some stores that had the front doors busted in, and for the most part stores with food 4 days into this emergency, but other stores too. And the city, at a time when people were home and hadn't had access to food for at least 3 days, and not everybody has the privilege to be able to stock up on a week's worth of food.
Right.
And not everybody has the transportation to go and stock up on a week's worth of food.
Right.
When we could have been organizing whatever emergency responders that we had who were mobile, finally, to start bringing food and start setting up feed centers. Instead, we placed police officers inside of what are essentially, entrapment schemes. So instead of bringing the food to the people, people were arrested walking through open doors that should have been boarded up to whatever. So you put together a looting task force, which, whatever you think about a looting task force, there was a time when we didn't have anybody out there getting food to people. So that would be my biggest, the thing that angered me the most about the response. Everything else we can dismiss as either people being overwhelmed, this being an extraordinary event, or incompetence. But that doesn't fit under any of these categories. So that's something that we should look into. How did that happen? How did that, how are we arresting people for, in these situations where you're leaving a honeypot out and, and there's hungry people. And then, we start seeing the same patterns. I'll talk, I can talk more about this later.
Right. Thank you, Mike. That's so important. Peter?
Sure. Well, taking that one step further, we have children. My sister's a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
We have children in our schools who they eat half of their lunch and they take the rest home because they know they will have no meal at night. I mean, these are dire situations that need to be addressed. And for the city to take such an aggressive posture, we've seen it before. We saw it with the speed cameras. We saw it with the checkpoints. This is par for the course. We've come to understand that and accept that in Buffalo, unfortunately. And we do need to continue to fight against that. It's completely wrong. So I have pulled up on my screen right now a map that was put together by the Buffalo News, and you can't see it if you're watching us, but you can see it on the website.
I think
the Buffalo News.
I might be able to pull it up here.
Sure.
If we go like this, wait a minute, and then you hold this,
I can.
and is it this fade to in fade, which camera E? Okay. No, I don't think that works. Anyway, this is also radio. So go ahead. People can look it up on the Buffalo News.
Right.
Sorry for wasting our time. But anyway, so moving right along. Go ahead.
All right. Sorry for the distraction there. It's a great map. We know about 35 or so people where they specifically were found dead. People froze to death in their homes. Imagine that.
Right.
I mean, we survived this storm. Thank goodness. There are people who froze to death in their own home, the one place that you should feel most safe. We have people who died in their car, people who died in snowbanks.
Right.
It's 44 people in Western New York, most of them, a vast majority, in the city of Buffalo. And half of all those who died on the east side of Buffalo. I don't think that we can ignore that fact. And it's absolutely devastating.
We went around talking about values, which that's our habit, and I think it sort of brings out what we want to. But I didn't ask about feelings because I want to say I am angry. I am so angry and depressed, and I did not know personally. I came to know, there were people that there's a second, connection, but the outrageousness of what just happened. And then I want to say what really makes me livid is anybody who can say that they're satisfied, that it was okay, that it was just, you did the best you could. And certainly some people did the best they could. And some of us didn't do as well as we could or we should. But there's all the things that should have been done. But there's all the things that need to be done and the priorities that we need to have. So first, reverence for life. That's the first thing. The looting, for that's down the road. Yes, later on, if you want to start boarding up things that shouldn't have been or holding people accountable for looting, not those precious moments when people are dying. Go ahead.
And I just don't mean to interrupt you, but
go ahead.
Be careful with the word looting.
Right.
Because if there was very little looting,
yes.
There was a lot of other things going on.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some looting, but there was also some surviving survival skills that people used. So there was all of that, but to tease out what was what, first save the lives. And first have the humility and the honesty and the clarity to say we need to do better. And to talk about what could have been done better and to admit what could have been done better and to prioritize the needs of the people. And that did not happen. They were not prioritized. They were not prioritized, and we would have had fewer deaths, and we don't even know how many deaths. So 44 is what we hear. That's the number that's been given. But a lot of deaths are a judgment call about whether they would have, and we don't know if there's still more research to be done to find out. They may still be finding people. There's people at home. There's people, if nobody is in touch with them, there's people who may be missing or in snowbanks still. Well, snowbanks, actually, most snowbanks, a lot of the snowbanks are gone. That's true. But even so, I mean, just...
If someone died of carbon monoxide poisoning in their home because their furnace vent was blocked, we may not yet know. And
one person who did was listed as one of those persons. But of the 44, we don't know if there are more. And we won't know. But whether we do or not, that our public officials are not willing to say how much they need to do better and how much they will try to do better and how devastating it is to the community. That is outrageous to me. Go ahead, Shyana.
I was just actually adding. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just adding to that because, of course, I'm very thankful that I was not affected as deeply personally. Me and my kids are fine. However, I am connected to all of my moms and babies, and one of those people could have possibly been one of my little babies, just a few months old, and his parents in the house with nothing for 3 days. So, when I hear, oh, we did the best we could, it feels like a slap in the face because you have to think about how we should prepare for these things way before now.
Right.
Like, why are we talking about this now? Like, how are we having the same conversation about my son, who is 17, went through the emergency, October storm where they had no resources. He's 17. At the end of the day, like, the lack of direct leadership, the lack of thinking about like what could possibly happen 17 years ago. Why weren't we thinking about what could have happened just last month? It really just, it's a, oops, I'm sorry, but guess what? You wouldn't know our story. I have another friend who her husband passed away, not directly connected, but directly connected. You know what I mean? Like, had a heart attack after the storm. So we got the aftershock of it all too, and we're the most vulnerable. So, I'm sorry doesn't actually work.
Right.
Because we're, okay, we live here. What are the provisions that we have? And I mean, of course, it's arming the people with the resources that we need in order to be out of survival mode in the first place. We're traumatized every single day.
Right.
So give us the resources that we need in order for us to thrive in moments like this, so we don't keep having these casualties of war. It's ridiculous.
I just need to add to the suffering and the effects of that suffering. So that is very real and very much ignored. And especially when people say, kind of, we did the best we could, which is far from the fact, because there are many things that could be said. It should have been that there was a travel ban earlier on, that it was announced way earlier on. As soon as they heard this was a life-threatening storm, that a monumental storm, they sort of said, we're going to have a travel ban. And it went and started early, not late, and announce it way early.
And send it out on your cell phone. We have the ability to notify every person with a click of a button. And they would have all gotten the message. They never did that. Our leadership failed at the county level, at the city level. And if they tell you otherwise, they're lying, because it's absolutely not true. They should be embarrassed for what has happened in this city.
And actually, I want to go ahead.
No, and I was just going to say, like, because I'm doing research, we're doing research now on like what other cities that are kind of similar to Buffalo or experience a lot of like natural disasters, and they all have like these emergency management plans.
Mhm.
And as we look through the city of Buffalo's websites and even the counties, they don't have like this comprehensive emergency management plan that tells people what to do in case of, you know, a disaster. And yeah, that definitely is incriminating to like it incriminates the city, like period, point blank period, because as you all said, like people died as a result of them not having these plans in place, putting the travel ban in place. And you can argue they didn't put the travel ban in place because they put profit over people, right? They wanted people to go to work. You know, they weren't sure what was going on. And you know, during a holiday season, people still wanted to be out and about, whatever, you know. And the young black girl that died, like that could have been me. I see myself in her. That could have been me in my car trapped, right? Like listening to my music, jamming. You know, it's the holiday season turning up, and then all of a sudden it's whiteout, and oh my God, I don't know what to do, right? Like that. I wake up thinking about her, obviously everyone, but I think about her a lot because I'm like, yo, that could have literally been me or my sister or Shyana, you know what I'm saying? And we just really just weren't prepared for that. And it was it was this administration's responsibility to prepare us for that, because as a administration, they should have access to information that the public just, you know, may not necessarily have because that's their jobs.
Information and resources. The federal government, FEMA,
and this
provides it.
Right.
It's a matter of taking it.
And,
go ahead.
Right. And then this was the year of the infrastructure bill, right? So they've gotten so much money through the infrastructure bill. So you would argue like whatever costs would have went into putting this plan together, they should have had those funds.
Correct.
How do we only have 2 warming stations and they don't have generators? How? So, you know, I know I'm sorry doesn't cut it, but you know, but the thing that really infuriates me is, so it should have been done and it wasn't done. Say it should have been done and we'll do it now. Say that. Don't say everything was all, you know, what could we do? What could we do? No, we could do better. We have to do better.
Well, no, they did say, sorry to cut you off. They did say that they did confess to that. Common Council said that they were unprepared. And so they did come out and say that.
Well, I've not heard that from too many people.
That's still, yeah, but that's still like,
right.
I mean, I don't even have the words to describe that. Like, it incriminates the city, if anything.
So let us move on into, we'll circle back around some of that, but I want you to talk about Just Streets and talk about Fair Fines and Fees Coalition a little bit, and then, you know, to just remind people what that is and the powerful things that we've done. Because I'm going to say the Western New York Peace Center is also part of the Just Streets and the Fair Fines and Fees Coalition. So, Jalonda.
Okay, really quick, because I don't want to take up too much time.
Sure,
but
no,
yeah,
go
just
ahead.
like basically, it's just about like what everybody here is kind of talking about, which is kind of was something that Peter alluded to. Well, no, I want to say that overall, what I'm hearing is that we need to really, really think about like what we mean when we talk about safety, and that's what Just Streets are about.
Right.
And it's about essentially investing in our communities, and our, you know, in the infrastructure, in neighborhoods, in alternative forms of safety to keep people safe within our street spaces. And clearly that could have been very beneficial when this blizzard hit, because, right, the city didn't have enough equipment, and, you know, they relied heavily on the police. They relied heavily on checkpoints and ticketing. And like the Just Streets campaign is like, okay, how can we use other mechanisms that are not extractive, that are not punitive, to keep people safe? And then also take into consideration the very distinct experiences that vulnerable populations have when they are moving out and about within the city of Buffalo. And a lot of times their experience is, you know, being criminalized, being targeted, being extracted from, clearly dying in the streets, right? And yeah, so that's what Just Streets is about. And one of the main things we're thinking about is how do we remove police from traffic enforcement how do we not rely on ticketing? How do we get the city of Buffalo to invest dollars in streets like Jefferson Avenue, which they are doing, but
Oops.
so it's just like things.
Mhm.
You said what?
No, go ahead. I thought we lost you for a second.
It's just that's the idea of it. And more recently, the NFTA has increased police presence on, within public transit, and they're calling it Ride Nice. So they're having like
Right.
all of these police officers out interacting because they basically want to get ridership back up to where it was, pre-pandemic, or a nice way of saying we want more white folks with money to ride our trains. So we got to get the police. We got to get more police to make them comfortable. And that's absolutely unacceptable. We have to find more reimagined ways, less punitive ways that don't rely on the police and extraction, to keep people safe, to, keep people moving, all those different things.
And Shyana, do you want to say something about that?
No, I'm 100% there. Like when it comes to, like really just making sure that we are looking at other ways of doing things, because what we have been doing hasn't been working, and we know that.
Right.
So like at the end of the day, like why are we continuing to do the same thing, expecting something different? We should be reimagining things, and we should be putting things in place right now, because we know what doesn't work, and it's what doesn't work right now. We saw that our emergency plan is like crap. It's terrible.
Right.
Let's build from here. Let's admit it and move on. Let's get where we need to be, though. So, like just actionable steps at this point to move to where we need to go.
Right. So we can keep going around on that if you want. Mike, do you have something you want to either mention or ask about, safety and addressing needs of safety in the street?
I'll just look at it from a perspective as how we frame this and frame these discussions. Mm-hmm. And, we're not safe when we have, an emergency hits us and we're not prepared for it.
Right.
But otherwise, we're way safer than you would know watching the TV news. So there's always been this, hyping of, this hyping of supposed threats that really statistically don't exist, right? We're safer than we've been at any other point almost in my lifetime, as far as like violent crime and things like that go. Yet you have this situation where you got it's very real. You got all these, people who are afraid to ride the Buffalo transit system because what? What actually has happened bad in the Buffalo transit system, right? No, the statistics aren't there. So, right. but you have to have police because you're thinking that's going to make people who are jittery because they've been watching too much of the evening news, right? On public transit. Why are we spending resources catering to that? When most people who ride on public transit do not feel safer in the presence of a police officer. Right. Quite the contrary. So again, we need to empathize with everybody, and not really keep playing this, this hyped up, horror, terror, don't go outside. No, the storm was dangerous. The storm killed people that definitely, should not have died. But you start seeing that gets all muddied up with this narrative of, crime and chaos that's not based in reality. So we have all these different things going on, and we're oftentimes misdirected to be talking about the wrong issues. Mm-hmm. And if we can't have a conversation, we can't come together as a larger community and work on serious problems. And that's what we're seeing, here is lots of, we did the best we could. Well, that's honest, actually. That's one of one of the most honest things they've said, but it wasn't the context they meant it to be in.
Right.
As opposed to, okay, how can we learn from this? I mean,
Right.
we had this traumatic event in 1977. Then we went out and bought a fleet of these Mercedes-Benz Uni plows that can go down places like Sobieski and Sweet Avenue and places they couldn't fit, snow equipment down. But, well, now it's 46 years later, and oops, they're gone. I mean, who's been in power? Who hasn't been replacing? We're running on infrastructural debt, and it's not just snowplows. We have wooden water mains. You have to keep building more and more and more condos, when there's no sewer system and there's no water system, and, focusing on that instead of focusing on having a healthy working community. So we're weak when it comes to something that tests, something that gives us a stress test, like a blizzard. I mean, blackouts are a regular thing now. It was not in in most of my life, but ever since. So what happened, right? Our electric system is sold to a British-based multinational, and we see what's happening with climate change. So put some of these wires underground, start, toughening the infrastructure. No, we're running privately, publicly, we're borrowing, we're balancing the books of government, we're keeping taxes artificially low, all based on infrastructural debt. We're borrowing from an infrastructure, allowing it to crumble. So snowplows are missing, electric lines come crashing down because they're vulnerable, and then people die.
Thanks, Mike. And Peter?
Yeah, well, we've had a couple of comments come in through Facebook,
Yes,
I believe.
yes. Thank you for our Facebook.
Oh, people are
comments.
watching. That's what's up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they're
Go ahead.
speaking specifically about the electric infrastructure, National Grid, what is it? Electric, New York Electric and
National
Gas.
Right,
Think about this. These people froze in their homes.
right.
Electric service was disrupted. This is Buffalo. This happens every winter. It's a given. And of course, it was a horrible situation, specifically during this blizzard. But you're absolutely correct about putting infrastructure underground. They're doing it across the globe. Other cities in the United States, it's underground. We're now running cables underground for the internet, the broadband.
Right.
They did that all last summer. I was watching them and before that. We should be doing that with our electric infrastructure. We had substations that were frozen over. They have no mechanism to prevent the freezing of these structures in the event power goes out. Why not have louvers or something that automatically trigger so it protects the infrastructure, prevents them from getting caked up with snow and ice? And then they had to allow them to thaw before they could turn it on. People were without power for days and days. I know how that is. We talked about it earlier with the storm from 2006 in October.
Right.
My family was without power for 13 days. It was devastating.
Right.
We had to stay home because water was coming in through the basement, and we had to keep that
Bail it.
to prevent it from flooding. But my goodness, we've learned nothing. We've learned nothing.
So where I want to go with this too is back to priorities. So we have armored vehicles. We have lots of new weapons that they're working on for, I mean, there's more, beefing up the
Tactical responses for the police department.
Right, for the police department, for the holding center, for the looting, anti-looting detail. I mean, that's where the priorities are. That is where the clear priorities are. That they didn't have a special task force on saving people's lives, finding people in the snowbank, finding people in their home. They didn't have a special one for that, but they had a special looting detail right away. The priorities are just so wrong. Just so wrong, and the inability to admit that they're the failures. So to say, it was the best they could, fine. That good. I mean, that's sort of true by definition, because it's the best they did. but that willingness and that eagerness to do better. And Jalonda, you said that there's been some statements like that, and we're glad to have the statements, but we need the actuality. And actually, another thing that we'll thank our Facebook friends, there's Josephine and Kathleen, right, who mentioned both of them in different ways about accountability. So I'd like us to go around a little bit about accountability and just some thoughts on that. So, Jalonda, do you have some thoughts on that? Or not, Jalonda? Or I could just throw it open to anyone who wants to just make a comment about accountability and whether and how people can be held accountable.
We're all accountable.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, who were you asking that to?
I was asking you what we were just going to do a go round on accountability. People's thoughts.
Yeah, like really quick, and I do think that that's a good point, because when we talk about infrastructure, a lot of people just think about like the streets, the built environment, and stuff like that. But yes, like the electricity obviously played a huge role in why people passed away.
Yes.
So no, but yeah, as far as like holding folks accountable, like I do know that, you know, people are already taking actions, right? Like, so there's like going to be some legal action taken, obviously, which makes sense, right? Like 44 people should not have died under this administration's, administration's leadership. So yeah, so legal action, I would say definitely valid.
Yes.
Additionally, I would say voting people out. Like, I feel like this is like just the great, another, sad and tragic example of just why we need new leaders, as soon as possible. And I think 2024 is the year for that. And then I would say, I'm sorry?
Even this year, we have a county executive election coming up.
I was talking about common. Yes, and I was talking about common council, but yes.
Right, common council and county executive this year. Right, thank you.
But yes, all of those things, voting folks out. And I would say, like, people just continue to use your voices and your platforms for, and your opinions about how this administration failed and what things you want to see change, and don't be afraid to disrupt, the current systems that we have in place, because we need everyone to create systemic change in Buffalo, right? Like, it just can't be a few folks. It has to be white folks. It has to be black folks. It has to be everyone. And so that's what I would say, to hold people accountable. And then obviously just get police out of roles that they don't no longer need to be in. I mean, I don't know if that's accountability. That's just an action step that needs to be taken. And then give Black people the reparations. Reparations.
Right.
All right.
Right. Right. Thank you, Jalonda. Shyana, thoughts about
no, thanks.
No,
just basically the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I said no, and then I start talking.
Sure.
But honestly, the same. We need to make sure that people are not shying away from the fact that they are being held accountable. Like, in mass numbers, we should be doing the same things that we know will get the results that we need. And everybody needs to know what that is. It shouldn't just be a few people working the plan. Like, everybody should know what the best thing or best next step is, and it's definitely not continuing in the same leadership. So as soon as we can get it, let's do it.
Thanks, Shyana. And Mike?
I mean, but we got to go beyond. We're really good in this country about voting people out of office.
We are?
But I mean, overall, not in Congress, but overall, we really have seen some incredible political upheavals with voting people out of office only to put worse ones into office. So we really need to be
better
thinking,
policy.
Yeah, we need to be thinking 2 steps ahead. And Jalonda hit the nail on the head. It's all about policy. It's all about policy. I mean, that's what Ibram X. Kendi talks about. He's talking about racist policy.
Right.
Forget racist people. This is racist policy, right?
Right.
You know, it's the same thing. This is racist policy, too, in our emergency response, simply because, I mean, 3 days after the storm, people in Buffalo were still dying while life was back to normal in Kenmore. What is Kenmore? It's a dotted line on a map. It doesn't look all that different from North Buffalo, except that they can go down their streets. They can go to stores that were open and get food. So, you know, it is, Jalonda's right. This is all policy. And we need to look at step 2 before we get to step 1. And step 2 is building a new leadership and then figuring out how to take these fantastic, incredible, and we're doing that, how to take these fantastic, incredible community leaders who are able to, provide for communities, who are able to deal with emergencies just as ordinary citizens and with small block clubs and groups, and put them in charge of government. And, it's a big building project. It's really easy to get people out of office, but we got to figure out for once to put better people into office. And that's grassroots. That's building up the candidates in our communities. Right.
I think just also what he is saying too, I am building a platform like that, and I think me also understanding that this is a problem for, I'm living it right now, within this whole network, I am actually living it. So, for me, I think that I'm touching my mothers and my families and my babies rather quickly. I think that, getting me in front of more people too, and more people who are actually living it, right at the seat of, what it is that we're doing.
Peter?
So I lived 10 years in Washington, D.C., and we have, in D.C., they have a city council like we have, but they also have advisory neighborhood councils or commissions, and they're made up of a bunch of folks from certain groups of city blocks, and you vote a representative to serve on this board, and they have governing authority and responsibility. It's a more distributive form of government. They're able to raise issues to the member of the city council that they're hearing directly day to day right in their own neighborhood. When, just like Buffalo, we have enormous districts that are gerrymandered, and it's difficult to get in front of a member of the city council. There's no question about it for the average citizen.
Right.
But to go next door and talk to your neighbor who happens to be on the ANC, the Advisory Neighborhood Council, that's a great opportunity. That's a way to get information, and it's also a way to it goes both ways, getting it from the seat of government to people and vice versa. But we have to also think critically about, think about the Just Streets initiative and the notion that we're more focused on the impacts that we have on the people. If we had adopted that posture and it was in place, I do not believe one bit that we would have ever had any anti-looting effort. The National Guard would not have been taking punitive steps to harm people. It's about serving people. We are government. Mike mentioned this before. We are the government. We can change things. We have the ability to do so. The Common Council is the policy-making body of our city. Unfortunately, we can have the best policies, but it requires the mayoral administration to actually implement those policies. And it's up to the Common Council to hold them accountable for implementing those policies. And unfortunately, the council has been unable to, many times, hold this administration accountable. And that is the most regrettable thing. We've got to figure out why that is and fix it. And we, the citizens, need to step up and fix it ourselves.
I want to go back to what I said about priorities, because if the priority was taking care of people's needs, the coming down on people like a ton of bricks would not be going on. And that, somebody said to me, oh, the police, that's not the mayor, but the police are under the mayor. The police commissioner of police reports directly to the mayor. So the priorities in what what police are doing with their energy, their equipment, and their time on the job is all determined by the mayor's office, by the mayor's administration, I should say. And the priorities need to be serving the people first and reverence for life first. And punishment, as far as back to, I love when I think Kathleen was the first to mention about, and also, both of our Facebook comments had to do with accountability, that there's also that consequences that people need, but it's not about punishment, it's about consequences. So there are consequences of different acts. The consequences of prioritizing going after property, going after policing or determining who can drive and who cannot drive, who should get a ticket and all of that took away from the efforts to find people and save their lives as that in those critical hours on Christmas Day, that anti-looting committee was or task force was enacted that very Christmas Day when people were dying, when the LBJ apartments were flooding, when all the person power was needed. So anyway, we're getting close to the end of this hour. So I'd really, I think we have some more we want to talk about on this. Would people like to continue this discussion a little bit into the next hour? Peter, would you?
Sure, absolutely.
Jalonda and Shyana, would you, or do you want to, or this is all the time you have right now? What is it? On your mic?
I'm running. Yeah,
You need to go.
running short on time.
Sure. So, and I'm going to guess that for Jalonda. So both of you, if you would, the two of you, just give your sort of main points that you want to drive home. We have 3 or 4 minutes. So Jalonda. Oh, we lost Jalonda. So why don't you go ahead, Shyana?
She said she's in the waiting room.
Yeah, I just let her in. I just saw that.
Oh, all right.
Okay, so we have 4 minutes. 3-4 minutes.
Yeah, no, I mean my main points were pretty much the same. Living through all of this, being very disappointed in the same response that we basically had 17 years ago, and so many times in between. It's time to take a harsh look at how we've been doing things. We know that it's been designed this way, and failure has been at the door every time. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Shyana. Jalonda?
Everything. No words? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know I was on speaker.
Yeah, no.
I was mute.
Yeah, no words is right. No, go ahead.
So, I mean, I don't know what the question was.
Your final thoughts that we have.
My final thoughts are, policy change, which goes back into systemic change. That's what we need. And we need to think creatively and reimagine like all areas of life. So that way we can get at the root issues of everything that black and brown people experience, but obviously all Buffalonians. So that way, when in times of crisis, we're already prepared because, we're living by this value system of people over profit every single day, right? And so when a crisis comes, we keep that same type of energy and we don't lose over 40 people. So, just sending my love and my prayers to the families that lost their loved ones, those that may be still missing, and prayers for Buffalo. And I'm praying for a strong leadership and better policy very soon.
Well, I certainly join you in all of that. And I want to thank both of you so very much, and really all of you, all four of you, for coming on. And Mike and Peter, we're going to continue a little bit into the next hour with this, and then we'll be talking about fascism, which is, you know, a different but still somewhat related in terms of priorities or even values. But thank you so much, both of you and all of you, for all that you do for the community, and we just couldn't be more grateful. This is an important topic, critically important, and we will be coming back to it again and again, because we cannot go through this again, and we're not going to. We are, you know, and yet we know that these climate catastrophes are coming on more. So we have to be ready, and we're going to be ready with or without whoever thinks they're in charge. Yeah,
I agree. Sorry, and I would be remiss to just not emphasize this one more time. Is that, like, if anyone listening wants to get involved in the Fair Fines and Fees Coalition, we are looking for new folks to help us push this campaign, Just Streets, Not Enforcement, which is about getting police out of traffic enforcement and investing in communities, not the police. Let us know. You can go to our Facebook page, and thank you so much, Ricky. Nice seeing you, Peter. Nice meeting you, Mike. Have a good night, everybody.
Okay, so thank you so very much. I can't thank you enough. This is Talking Peace, and together we've been talking peace in truth and love. I'm making those claps so that...
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Thanks, Jillian. Thank you so much, Jalonda. We'll be getting some more people, I know. Thanks, Shyana.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Good night.